So this is my shoddily poured drawn diagram for the Supra here. So we have three things that need to be powered, and the ECU and it has wiring to the ECU. So we got the fans, the electronic boost control solenoid, and the wideband O2. So each of these need a key on power, and then each of these have their wire that needs to go into the ECU. So the thing is that the ECU, a lot of people don't understand this, but the ECU grounds the other side. Now the wideband O2 doesn't do that. It's just because that there's a wire that needs to go to the heater circuit on the ECU, so don't think of this needing to be ground to turn it on. But yeah, so either way, we have three wires that need to go to the ECU and then three wires to go to the main relay. So I know my diagram is really hard to see. So number one here is my main relay, and then the three things that it needs to connect to. And the reason why I only drew this diagram was just to get a visual diagram to look at and then to list this all out. The problem that I'm having though is how can I make this where it's serviceable? Instead of fixing the factory main relay, I'm just going to go ahead and run it like a universal relay, and I'm going to tuck it somewhere. But I need to figure out where I can put everything and make it where it's just, you know, like you're able to disconnect it. So this is kind of it tentatively. But like I said, I just got some figuring out to do on my end on what's the smartest way to get everything hooked up and connected to where everything is serviceable. But I'm thinking currently is I'm just going to make a sub harness that has 6 connectors in the engine bay, and then run 6 wires into the car with the opposing connector in it. And that way you can disconnect it, you know, if the motor ever needs to come out for whatever reason, but you can disconnect it and then set it aside. But even still, I'm not 100% that that's the way I want to do it. Okay, so I think I've got it figured out. What we're going to do is we're going to group the 4 ECU trigger wires, or the 4 ECU wires. So the 4 ECU wires consist of wideband, fan, boost control solenoid, and the new main relay, right? So we'll group those into 4 connectors, or a 4-pin connector, and then that's going to take care of that. We'll have one 4-pin connector. All those will be ECU signal wires. The relay will be mounted in the engine bay. It will take power from the alternator source, the exact same place that we have the fan powered from. So we'll get a eyelet with a fuse, and that will power our main relay. From there, we'll have a single connector that's going to go inside the cabin, and that single connector will be for 12-volt ignition here that will tap off the ECU. Now I could run a 5-pin connector to group all of these, and I may or may not look into that, but 5-pin connectors are kind of hard to come by. They generally come in like 6, you know, even numbers. So I may have this one separate on its own, and this also needs to be fused, which is another reason why I kind of want to run this one separately. If this were ran separately and fused, I probably won't need an extra connector here. And then from pin 87, it will just come out. The pin 87 is a 14 gauge wire, and then we'll have it split into a 3-way 22 AWG here, and then that'll go to its whatever it needs to go to. And we won't run a connector to this side of it, I don't think. I think it's just going to be a direct wire to it. The only reason why we would want to run this connector wire here is if we need to disconnect it from the ECU. But even still, I don't really think, like thinking it through now, I don't really think we even need connectors here, just because that every one of these has their own connector. So the EBCS already has its own connector. The only thing that does not have a connector is the fan wiring. The wideband has its own connector, EBCS has its own connector, and then the relay itself has its own connector. So now that I'm talking through it even further with you guys, I don't really foresee a need to be able to unplug all this, because these are all sub harnesses that all go into the ECU anyways. So even if you were to remove the engine, for instance, you would just unplug these. There's no reason to, you know, have another master disconnect here. It just seems like we're adding complexity for no reason there. So I was able to find a threaded hole over here. I think this will be fine. There's not really anywhere else that's like centrally located, in my opinion, that we could throw the relay into. And so the reason is that the boost control solenoid is right here. The wideband wiring is right over here that I ended up losing the pins for, so I got to order some more pins, unfortunately. And then the fan wiring is down over here. So this I think is kind of like centrally located for all the power wires. Boost control solenoid, we're gonna have to cut this weather pack connector off of the original harness and then move it over to here. But yeah, so this is kind of like the centrally located position that I think is going to be okay. It is a little bit close to the turbo stuff. That does concern me a little bit, but unfortunately, fortunately enough, there's quite a bit of gap here, so I think we're going to be okay. And then this hood is vented, so you know, I ended up getting a water resistant relay here. So anyways, with that being said, we've got 5 wires coming off of this. This blue wire in the center here is what's called 87A, which is actually normally connected unless it's powered on. We're not using that, so I'm just gonna cut that completely off. And then we'll be dealing with 4 wires. From there, we're gonna have either the red or the yellow is going to go to the alternator, and then whichever one's left is going to power the rest of this. So I'm probably going to use the red wire here, and then we'll run a wire, like a 14 AWG wire, down along the factory harness into the alternator with a fuse, which I have floating around here, out here somewhere. And then the yellow wire we'll use to tap into the fan, wideband, and the boost control solenoid will go into the yellow. Then from there, we'll be left with the black and the white wire. Now the black and white wire are going to go into the ECU and 12 volt. It doesn't matter which one goes to where, but that stuff will be going inside. Now what I'm concerned about though is that we have this plate here and we've got a lot of wires running through here. So now we've got to consider that we've got these 2 wires going in plus 3 other smaller wires to control, you know, the wideband, the boost control solenoid, and the fan again. So I ended up making the 12 volt power lead here. I put 4 of them. The reason why I added a 4th one was just basically for flex fuel, because this car doesn't have flex fuel now, but obviously it's a pretty common modification that everyone does when it comes to standalones and Supras and all that other jazz. So I went ahead and made 4 of them. Obviously we're only going to use the 3, and as you guys saw, I have everything all looped together. So what I've got to do is look up and figure out what fuse we're going to put in here. That's pretty easy to do, figure out with Ohm's law or whatever, but this is basically it. Now okay, so these 3 wires are actually they're written on the label. So I have 4, which is actually wideband output. So 4 is for the wideband heater, then 6 and 7 is going to be fuel pump and fan. And so I've just kind of followed the factory wiring on that. And like I said, I just wanted to reuse these because they're already set up. Now the thing about 6 is actually, according to the diagram, is like a fan, but 7 is just like a regular general purpose output, but I wanted them to just be next to each other. So we're gonna leave these 3 out, but these are the 3 that need to go into the cockpit. All right, so if you take a look at this, these connectors are essentially identical with the exception of this one has a locking tang and this one does not. So we're switching this up here and it's actually pretty simple to do. It does take a little bit of muscling to get them in and out, but it's not in the world. And you don't need a cool little deep end tool like this. Something extremely flat and narrow here will do the trick. And you're just going to look and you'll see that there's like a little recess here that this is going into, and you just kind of push down on it to get it to clear the tang, and with a little bit of muscling it'll come right out. So, and a lot of times these just do not like to play well. So as you can see, this one's removed, and you'll see that we've depressed the metal tang down here. Hopefully you guys can see that. But what you do is you basically will raise the tang back up. Just lift it up with your fingernail, and that's all you really need. We're going to repeat the process on this same side here. And there you go. So as you can see, now these are completely out. And I'm just going to use my nail and just pull up on the tangs just a little bit. And then we're going to grab our little kit here to change this out. So the flat side goes here and the long side goes here. And so now that these are all in, we're going to slide them in and they should click. It might take a little bit to line them both up, but as you can see, it goes, and then give it a nice tug. So these are nice and seated, nothing is moving around. And from there, as you can see, these are the female ends. We're gonna grab the male ends. So we got our male ends here. And we're gonna go start working on the fan side. Now on the fan side, they use just regular little crimp ends, which is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But you know, since we have our nice little fan harness, why not do it the nice way? So I'm gonna use the fuse box here as a bowl so I don't lose anything. Boop. And we're gonna go ahead and cut these ends off and crimping them in. All right, so we're gonna get started on this. And what we're gonna do first is I'm just going to pull the wire out. These are just zip tied in. I'll go ahead and just cut out these zip ties real quick here, just to give us a little bit of working length on our harness. And we're gonna go ahead and look at this poorly crimped wire. Go ahead and cut these completely out, just because we don't need them. And we're just gonna go ahead and strip all 4 of these. And we're just gonna strip all these out just so we don't have to deal with holding a bunch of different tools all at the same time. And it'll kind of give us some more room on our workspace. So now we've got that done. We're gonna set our tools out on the ground. We've got our wire crimp here, just kind of double check it right quick. Looks like it's the good size. And so I'm not sure which one of these 2 I'm going to use. So just looking at the crimp ends here and knowing that the size that we're going to use, we're going to just attempt to start off with the recommended size here based off the wire strip is probably this 16 to 14 gauge here. We'll try that first. Get it all set up in our crimp here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And we're just going to grab one of these. Make sure it's nice and seated. And give it a little smush. Now, this should give us an idea. We're going to give it a light tug, and that's too loose. So, fortunately enough, it pinned out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the smaller end. And that feels a lot better. Perfect. That's a perfect crimp here. So we use the 1814 die, and that's good there. Go ahead and hit this with the same one as well. This one though, I usually don't do it as hard because it doesn't need that. It's just there for the wire. So that looks good there. And I'm going to go over to our fan harness and we're going to take a look at which one's which. What I like to do here as well, just to make things a little bit easier, is like I will lightly connect the connector into it, and then from here we just made up black to black and blue to blue. So black is on the bottom there. Just double check that really quick here. Yep, see, good thing we double checked because that definitely was wrong. Bam, nice, good to go. So we'll go ahead and complete that again using the IWC 1424A is what I used. So, and honestly, since I've been using this set, the A seems to get the most use out of the pair. There has been a couple connectors that I've used on the B, but mainly it's all been A. So same deal here, just line it all up, give it a nice squeeze, pop this sucker out, give it a tug, make sure that that's good, and since it's good, go ahead and hit the wire insulator side of it, and boop, there we go. Give it a nice tug, good to go, and then stick that sucker in. And now you've got a nice little connector that's going to go into our fan harness, fan relay harness, and it's all locking. So, isn't that sweet? All right, so I got the other side completed on camera and I dropped our tools, but I've got the other side completed, and now we have a beautiful setup. Oh. Now we got everything all plug and play. So everything is good, connections are nice, nothing's going anywhere, and now we just got to isolate it. So it's all done there. So super stoked on how that turned out, and that should make everything servicing down the line a lot easier, a lot simpler, and it takes away, you know, the chances of someone flip-flopping the wires and having the fans run in reverse. All right, so here is the gauge cluster for the Supra. So this cluster has been redone actually, and I'll give you guys the details on it a little bit here. But this was like a factory style cluster, or it is a factory cluster, but the owner of the Supra said he was having issues with the tachometer working and speedometer not working. Just none of this was working. Fuel level, he said, was like slow to respond, but it got rebuilt and redone, so definitely looks a lot cleaner. So we're gonna go ahead and start putting this back in. So here's the cluster in its new home. Looks a lot better in my opinion. Definitely looks a lot cleaner. The gauge cluster you can see is like been refreshed, and so like you know, gauge clusters, they start to get hazy as far as the like the face goes, and I mean, man, this looks awesome.